Good day, learners. I am Ms. Reynalyn G. Fernandez of Pasay City East High School, and I will be discussing a lesson about feminist literary criticism from Quarter 3, Week 2, Day 3, with an objective, critique the literary selection based on feminist approach. I am here to help you out in understanding your lesson for today, so sit back, relax, and enjoy. First, I want you to arrange the jumbled letters to come up with the name of the given female characters below. You have few seconds to think of their names. I'm sure that you are familiar with these popular women. Number 1 is, yes, you are correct. She is Mulan. Number 2, if you answered Maleficent, that's correct. Number 3, the ever beautiful Katniss of Hunger Games. Number 4, obviously, Elsa. For the last one, number 5, the girl with the long hair, Rapunzel. You did a great job. Were you able to name all of them? These personae are examples of feminist character, not because they are female, but because of how they are personified in the movie. All characters are epitome of the independent women who, in spite of fears and difficulties, can stand not only for their own rights and happiness, but also for the rights and happiness of those who are important to them. Now let's move on to our lesson for today. Let's first define feminism. Do you have any idea of what feminism is? Britannica defines feminism as the belief in social, economic, and political equality of the sexes. Although largely originating in the West, feminism is manifested worldwide and is represented by various institutions committed to activity on behalf of women's rights and interests. What is feminism as an approach in literature? When it comes to literature, feminism is concerned with the politics of women's authorship and the representation of women's condition within literature. It focuses on the role of literature in movements and ideologies aimed at defining, establishing, and defending equal political, economic, and social rights for women. This includes seeking to establish equal opportunities for women in education and employment. The question now is, how are you going to critique a literary text using feminist approach? Remember, feminist literary criticism shows the role of literature in the following. 1. Establishing equality between men and women. 2. Protecting and promoting women's rights. 3. Giving women equal opportunities in education, employment, civics, and politics. You will get a clearer view of this as we go along our lesson. Now this is it. A reader who does a feminist criticism asks the following questions. 1. How is the relationship between men and women portrayed? 2. What are the power relationships between men and women, or characters assuming male or female roles? 3. How are male and female roles defined? Do characters take on traits from opposite genders? How so? How does this change others' reactions to them? What does the work reveal about the operations economically, politically, socially, or psychologically of patriarchy? Another, what does the history of the work's reception by the public and by the critics tell us about the operation of patriarchy? Next, what role does the work play in terms of women's literary history and literary tradition? Technically, these questions would be answered through getting an in-depth roles of each character, specifically their positions in the society. Try to find out and focus on how the male and female characters were portrayed in a literary piece, including their stand with the issue of patriarchy, which will be discussed later on. Let us have this poem by Christina Georgina Rossetti as our example. What you have to do is to just pause the video so that you can read the whole poem. Before we start analyzing the poem, let me first introduce to you Christina Rossetti. Christina Rossetti, from 1830 to 94, was one of the Victorian era's greatest and most influential poets, along with Alfred Lord Tennyson, Robert Browning, and Algernon Charles Swinburne. According to one of the studies about her life entitled Christina Rossetti, a Feminist Visionary, Christina Rossetti did not join the feminist movement, but her poetry speaks as clearly and effectively as the most radical feminist tract. Economic subjugation of women is a theme in several Rossetti poems, and a close reading of Goblin Market, one of her earliest poems, reveals a strong feminist statement. Let us now analyze the poem by answering the following questions. Have you found the characters in the poem as well as their roles? How about their gender? Take a look at the word his. It means that the owner of the studio or simply the artist is male. Next is the word her. In the line, we found her hidden just behind those screens, which means that someone is seeing an image of a woman in a canvas. Now, what about how the female character was portrayed in the poem? The artist painted an image of different women, namely a queen, a nameless girl in freshest summer green, a saint, and an angel. All those characters can be described as someone who has a pure heart, who speaks softly and elegant. But all those characters doesn't really tell who the model really is. Those were just what fills the artist's dreams. Then, what can you notice about the power relation? Who decides as to how the model will be painted? Again, in the last line, it is the painter who decides how the model will be painted. Meaning, the painter or the artist is the one in power. Another thing is, do you think the female model is happy with it? In the line, not one with waiting, not with sorrow dim, it can tell us that what the painter is trying to portray is the opposite of how the model really feels. Another meaningful question to ask is, what does the work reveal about the operations, be it economically, politically, socially, or psychologically, of patriarchy? Patriarchy is a system of society or government in which men hold the power and women are largely excluded from it. Historically, this poem is composed in December 1856 and it remained unpublished during Rossetti's lifetime. And this year is also a Victorian era where society was organized hierarchically. While race, religion, region, and occupation were all meaningful aspects of identity and status, the main organizing principles of Victorian society were gender and class. In addition, if we take a look at the first two lines, these paintings might capture the model's beauty like a mirror, but they're also a lot like the screens she posts behind, concealing rather than revealing her real self, making loss of her own identity.
Then if we also notice in the last two lines, not as she is, but was when hope shone bright, not as she is, but as she feels his dream. This has something to do with how the artists have taken for granted the real self of his model. Instead, he paints an endless series of portraits in which the model is an idealized figure. So, she was framed and controlled by the artist. Using the feminist approach to literature, we can say that Rossetti's In an Artist's Studio is a poem about objectification. In seeing his model only as a beautiful dream girl, the artist overlooks her humanity and her true essence as a woman. If there are some things that you wish to know more about this poem, try to find it out using the link that will be posted before this video ends.
Before we end this lesson, let's have a recap. Remember that a feminist literary criticism is concerned with the politics of women's authorship and the representation of women's condition within literature, and it also shows the role of literature in the following. First, establishing equality between men and women. Next is protecting and promoting women's rights. Next is giving women equal opportunities in education, employment, civics, and politics. If you wish to do a literary criticism using feminist approach, here are some of the questions to consider. Relationship of men and women, roles of men and women, and then patriarchal operations economically, politically, socially, or psychologically, and others. I hope you learned from our lesson today. If it's still not clear to you, you may go back to the module prepared to you, or you can just play back this video lesson. Again, this is Miss Reynalyn G. Fernandez of Pasay City East High School saying, Happy learning!